evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regular Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, October the 4th, 2021 to order. And this meeting is being broadcast live and recorded and posted on the town's website for those who are unable to view the meeting live. The Town of Sydney has considered its communicable disease prevention plan and the principles of transparency, openness, and accountability. Beginning this evening, 5 members of the public who have registered in advance are welcome to join Council and essential staff in Sydney's Council chambers during regular Council and Committee of the Whole meetings. To reserve a space to attend regular Council or Committee of the Whole meeting in person, or to reserve an opportunity to participate or present at a meeting virtually, register in advance at admin@sydney.ca or call our main line. Registration must be made prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting. I've called our meeting to order, and I'd also like to respectfully acknowledge that we're holding this evening's meeting on the traditional lands of the Wasanich people. I now seek an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next, we have approval of the minutes from our regular Committee of the Whole meeting of September 7th, 2021.
Move adoption.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have presentations. Green Shores Program, presentation by Kelly Loch and Andrea McDonald, Stewardship Centre for BC. Good evening and welcome. You have 10 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll be doing a bit of a tag team. Andrea will be doing the slides. So good evening, my name is Kelly Loch, and I'm located on the traditional territory of the Cowichan people. And I'd like to introduce Andrea McDonald, who has been a summer intern with us with the Stewardship Centre. So I'm just trying to switch gears to my own. So Andrea's put a great deal of information together for us tonight, and I hope it's helpful to you. The Stewardship Centre is a nonprofit organization with a vision to help British Columbians to understand, enjoy, and sustain healthy ecosystems through stewardship. Green Shores is a keystone program of the Stewardship Centre, and the Green Shores projects are delivered in collaboration with numerous organizations such as the Pacific Salmon Foundation. Today, I will be speaking to you about how we can help to minimize the impact of development on shorelines through the application of Green Shores as a nature-based approach. What is Green Shores? Green Shores is a framework for designing and applying nature-based approaches that are sustainable and restore or even enhance the shoreline, both on coastal and lake settings. Green Shores aims to help communities adapt to climate change, which we're all in the middle of, by fostering healthy shoreline ecology, which ultimately benefits human well-being. This is supported by current research, which is showing that nature-based approaches really do help communities become more resilient to the threats of climate change. Green Shores also hopes to promote better understanding of the importance of healthy shorelines. And to quote Jacques Cousteau, people protect what they love. This is a local Vancouver example of Green Shores for Homes, a project before and after. The before shoreline shows a really significantly compromised shoreline with respect to habitat value. There's extremely limited access to the shoreline for homeowners and a little bit less than ideal aesthetics. After Green Shores for Homes application on the right, which included extensive native plantings, and it was located actually in a Garry Oak ecosystem area. And there's a removed seawall, as you can see, that's missing, and the fence, and a large woody debris was strategically placed to offset wave energy. The owners, the homeowners, in this case it was a developer who works in the Nanaimo area, were actually really thrilled with the outcome. And to quote them, "Becoming involved, reading and learning about the benefits of Green Shores through this project has been enlightening and fun. Thank you to the Green Shores team for sharing your knowledge and passion for the program. We look forward to enjoying the garden maturing and evolving with the hope of it being an inspiration for neighboring waterfront owners. Best of all, the birds love it. It's always good when our homeowners have fun. This is another example in Washington. It's on a lake, so we mentioned coastal and lake settings. And in the before photo, you can see there's lots of green lawn and a seawall. And basically, there's not much biodiversity, or at least not promoted. And in the after photo, the natural shoreline is restored to increase the habitat value. There's much better access to the shoreline for the homeowners and their friends. And the property is protected from changes in water level and any potential or resultant erosion with sea level rise or just climatic change to lakes as well. Green Shores is underpinned by 4 guiding principles: to preserve the integrity or connectivity of the shoreline processes, to maintain or enhance habitat diversity and function, to minimize and reduce pollutants to the shoreline environment, and to reduce and hopefully reverse cumulative impacts to shoreline systems. This graphic shows us that there's a lot happening on a shoreline and upland from a shoreline for that matter, actually. So the Green Shores principles really emphasize the importance of trying to maintain those natural processes, and in kind of simple fact, it is that water and sediment need to move along from upland to lower and along the shoreline as well through longshore transport. One of the most common ways homeowners impact these processes is through installation of hard armoring such as seawalls or riprap. Hard armoring at one location does impact this much larger cycle of sediment movement. It affects the shoreline, reduces habitat, and can actually be more expensive in the long run because of repair and replacement costs. How does Green Shores actually work? It's a multifaceted approach. It has 2 underpinning backbone credit and ratings guides: Green Shores for shoreline development, which is for larger scale projects on large scale residential parks, for example, not so much for marinas where there's a lot of in-water work. And then Green Shores for homes, which, as the title implies, is for homes or residential properties. But there's other facets to Green Shores that make it work as well, and that's certification. There's third-party verification that the projects have met the best management practices included in the credits and ratings guides. There's registration of approved professionals that have met all the training requirements of Green Shores. There is actually training as well. And this is where we're hoping you'll come into it, is there's Green Shores for local government. So there's a working group that's been developed because it was felt that you can have as many credit and ratings guides and documentation, but you've got to have it roll out on the ground. You've got to have an operational linkage. So we have a Green Shores local government working group that right now has membership from CRD, Comox Valley Regional District, Bowen Island, and we've had members from other locations. Actually, there's Surrey as well. We've had members from other municipalities in the past as well. And it's, again, I just want to reiterate, it's a real operational linkage to helping to work collaboratively to address threats to the foreshore environment. This is an example of one of the credit and ratings guides. How does it work? It really is just promoting those best management practices, using a nature-based approach to protect the land from erosion, flooding, sea level rise, by stabilizing shorelines, restoring habitat, increasing resilience to climate change, and even increasing recreational economic value. People like to have a natural shoreline. They like to see the look of it, and they like to see the birds and the other wildlife that comes with it. This is another example of a project in Cowichan Bay. How can Green Shores and the local government working group potentially help your community? There's many ways. One is through demonstration of leadership in climate change, resilience, and adaptation planning. Another is to help meet biodiversity and emissions goals. Third is to protect and restore essential habitat. Also by providing educational training. I mentioned the Green Shores training. We've given that to government staff, property owners, managers, local stewardship groups, and we can also help to offer more cost-efficient shoreline development options. So we're hoping that Green Shores has synergies with the Sydney Council priorities, which we understand to be at least these 4: environmental stewardship. Green Shores is guided by stewardship principles. Secondly, to combat sea level rise, Green Shores is a nature-based approach that protects people and property from sea level rise and flooding. Thirdly, to address environmental issues and adapt to climate change. Green Shores encourages a more resilient shoreline that adapts to climate change. So instead of a hard seawall, it has a shoreline that adapts and utilizes wood and materials to offset wave energy, for example. And then fourthly, to protect environmentally sensitive areas. Green Shores actually requires in the application process to have the recognition and designation of sensitive areas and then protection through the approach of how the project is rolled out. This shows us a little bit about where some of our Green Shores for Homes projects are located on East Vancouver Island, up around Qualicum Beach, Parksville, Nanaimo, down to Cowichan Bay, the photo I just showed you. And then we've got Green Shores for shoreline development projects on the mainland. And we're always looking for more. The benefits of joining Green Shores through the local government working group, we hope there's many. Firstly, I mentioned training. The training is actually free. You would have a dedicated training session on an annual basis, which we found really helps to raise awareness about nature-based approaches. There's peer-to-peer learning and collaboration among the municipal government members. There's free enrollment for Green Shores for Homes projects because of funding that we receive right now. There's other project funding opportunities that come up from time to time, and we are very willing to share those. There's a resource library, there's technical assistance, and more. So basically, the hope is that the local government working group would help support your community and support Green Shore projects in your community. I should mention that with this one, we actually have fun as a local government working group from time to time too. This is pre-COVID, the last meeting that we could have together in February of 2019. So how to join? You can either email DG Blair, who's our executive director, or myself as a Green Shores Projects coordinator. And the enrollment fee is a sliding scale from 5,000 for large municipalities down to around 3,000 for small to medium, and DG works that out. The other commitment would be for the monthly meeting, which is about an hour on Zoom. So it's not a big time commitment, and it seems to be very meaningful. The other benefit, I think, of the local government working group that I've noted is that there's an opportunity to affect larger policy changes. Right now, we're working with the West Coast Environmental Law to develop a coastal protection strategy for BC. And apparently BC is one of the last jurisdictions to have this type of protective strategy in place. I'd just like to give a shout out and a thank you to, there's numerous funders and partnerships. I mentioned Pacific Salmon Foundation. We've got a recent project that we started in April called the Green Shores for Salmon. So trying to bring the mandates together, and numerous educational institutions that we partner with for the delivery of the training. And Green Shores for Homes is actually going coast to coast. So right now it's getting updated and will be rolled out in the Maritimes. There's a strong center in Nova Scotia, and PEI and New Brunswick are also interested, and we're in meetings with them as well. So with that, I'd love to open it up to any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Ms. Loch. I'll now turn to my colleagues if we have any questions or comments for the presenters. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just a question about, in terms of local governments, there's the working group. Do local governments also hire your organization to work on particular projects, or is the working group something that we would just tap into if there's a project we're working on and we're looking for some advice and guidance on that?
Thank you. No, that's a great question. And that actually brings to mind that what we're developing, there's Green Shores level 1, 2, and 3 for training. And the third level brings about the designation of a Green Shores approved professional. So what we would do at SEBC, if you had a project in your area, is refer you to that list of approved professionals. And it just makes it go so much more smoothly. And actually something I didn't mention, but there's also underway a process to have expedited permitting for Green Shores projects. And DG mentioned recently that the permit cost for a nature-based Green Shores project can be greatly reduced to a homeowner. So I see those as being linked. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you both for your presentation. And we do have some of the material printed off for our reference, and we appreciate your time, and thank you for coming to our meeting this evening.
Thank you so much. and have a great night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You as well. And that takes us to agenda item 6, which is development applications. We have one before us, and that's development permit application number DP 100825 and development variance permit application number DV 100310 at 2313 Orchard Avenue. And that is to relax lot coverage, side yard setback for accessory buildings and width of accessory buildings in order to construct 2 small lot single-family dwellings. And we have a presentation by Mr. Ryan Hoyt of Ryan Hoyt Designs. Good evening, sir, and the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Good evening. Thanks very much. I'm just going to share my screen here with you. So thank you. So we're here tonight to introduce a 2-lot subdivision at 2313 Orchard Avenue. So Orchard Avenue and the property at 2313 is outlined in the red square that you see, with Orchard Avenue on the north, 8th Avenue to the west, and the laneway there in between on the east side of the property. This application does resemble an application that we presented to council recently, just across the street and up a few blocks here at 2356 and 2364 Orchard. A lot of the same elements, so we were excited to see that project move ahead through council a couple of weeks ago. So hoping to build off of that with this application here tonight. So this application here is for 2 small lot homes fronting Orchard Avenue and the laneway. Both homes have a rear garage, single car garage with access off of the laneway, similar to the previous project on Orchard across the street. Both of these houses have a patio in between the house and the garage, and a patio along Orchard Avenue in the front. Again, just another look at the site and the plans here. We do have an easement for parking across Lot B in favor of Lot A, and some utility easements as well. There will be some tree removal required. Some of the boulevard trees on the site will be removed and then replaced as part of this redevelopment. This is the existing street view of the house as it exists on Orchard, and you can see some of these boulevard trees, and a lot of them are sort of overgrown kind of hedge type trees, so they will go as part of this application, and we will have a 2-to-1 replacement on these boulevard trees as part of this application. The design of these homes is heading in a little bit of a transitional design style here. The last few applications we presented to council have been sort of aiming at a age-in-place demographic. This is a little bit different in the sense that this project is really set up for families, and recognizing that there is a strong desire for families to find housing in Sydney, and these small lot developments and small lot homes are a great opportunity for families to make their way into the market. So the layouts of these houses are slightly different in that we've got a really nice functional large living space on the main floor, and then 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on the upper floor. So these perspective views here feature kind of a bit of a modern farmhouse and a bit of a European farmhouse influence to the design. Very simple but elegant form, and a really sort of welcoming presence from the street and from the laneway. As you can see from the top is the view from the corner of Orchard and the lane looking down. The view in the bottom here is sort of a simulated view from the east, just looking into the rear yard. This would be the view sort of in the rear, with the garages not there, just for some demonstration. And again, another bit of a bird's eye look from the laneway into the rear yards, and then a bit of a view of how the garages do function off of the laneway. And this is a view directly of the laneway of what the houses look like. We went with a bit of a kind of modern juxtaposed design on the facades of these homes to take what otherwise would be a somewhat simple and stacked massing, and introduce a bit of a drop to the roof line to soften that massing and introduce some bit of a modern spin on a very otherwise classic looking design with this dormer and entry detail. Just a quick summary of the variance request for this project. The lot coverage allowance on these properties is 35% for the first story, 30% for the second story, and in both cases here we are proposing a lot coverage variance to 39.8%. Again, this is in line with the variances that we have proposed and had approved on several applications of late, and a bit of an established trend for the density that we're seeing on some of these small lot infill developments. Again, just sort of panning back to this property, we have homes of similar size here at 23, 56, and 64. Same density on these two lots. There's actually a couplet house that's almost finished under construction here. So those are not single families, but again, the property density is about 43% on those ones. So you know, the variance we're seeking in this case is roughly in the same realm as what these other projects have seen. And again, you can see these very similar layouts of two small lots on many of these properties on the surrounding blocks. I'm just going to go through the numbers here quickly. The breakdown of a proposal for 39.8% lot coverage is a house that consumes 32% of that and a detached garage at 7.8%. So what this allows us to achieve is just under 1,800 square feet of living space over the two levels, which really is a comfortable amount for a family home, 3 beds, 2.5 bathrooms. And obviously in each of these applications with slab on grade construction, because of the flood level, there is no crawl spaces. So spaces for storage such as the garage and attic spaces are imperative and really necessary. So having that detached garage space and then consuming that 7.8% lot coverage there is really necessary to make these houses function for families. And you know, within the allowable density of essentially 35% or 30% for a second story, that would otherwise translate to about 16 or 615 square feet on the upper level of these houses, and that's just not feasible to provide enough space for a family set of bedrooms on that upper floor. So we feel that in this case, the 40% really does get this house to a position where it really could suit a family well, and certainly it can really suit anybody in this configuration. The other variances that we're seeking in this case are some minor setback variances for the garages in the rear yard. The required setbacks are 1.2 meters on each side. And in both cases, we're seeking a small reduction on one side down to 1.09 meters. So, you know, a few inches at that, but we are bound by the minimum dimensions that the parking bylaw stipulates a garage be to be able to count as the required parking. So that's why we didn't simply just reduce the garage to not require a variance in this case. So it's a small amount, but on lots of this dimension, it is required such that the parking does count towards the required parking. Finally, the bylaw requires that garages are no more than 50% of the allowable lot width, mainly to prevent the garage from dominating the streetscape of a home. In these cases, we have rear yard garages with access off the laneway. So they're really not the scenario that section of the bylaw was aimed to avoid, and really just because of the narrow lot width and the required garage depth, we end up with variances requiring the garage width to exceed 50% up to 72.8%. But on this property, we do have a really strong street presence, no view of the garage from the actual street frontage on Orchard, with the garages accessed off of the lane. So just in summary, seeking the lot coverage variance and 2 small dimensional variances on the garages, and that is all in this case. So the siting of the houses in both cases is compliant.
Thank you,
Thanks very
Mr.
much.
White. I'll now turn it over to committee if we have questions. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hoyt, for the presentation. A few questions. Can you tell me if the current residence is owned or rented?
It is being rented at current.
Is being rented, and I know this may not be within your purview, but do you know if the occupants have been able to find some other place to live, or did you give them any kind of help along the way in terms of extra time to find another accommodations?
I don't know. I am not the owner of the property and have not been through the details of that with the owner at this time.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that you mentioned the size factors. Is that, I'm assuming that's why you didn't consider suiting these units?
In this case, really, the only opportunity to fit a suite would be in a basement, but because of the location and the elevation of the property relative to required flood construction, we won't be able to have a basement, and we'll have to build up the main floor elevation to have a slab on grade. And in properties where you have to build the entire property up to then go and look at 3 full stories above grade, we just didn't feel like that was a massing that was going to be favorable. So basically stayed here with the 2-story massing. And
Further, so you mentioned families. I wonder if you might be able to provide what the list price for these homes might be when they're completed?
there is no list price at current.
Do you have any kind of, I mean, business plan? You must have some kind of idea of what you might need to charge for these homes to.
I don't have that information, I'm sorry.
Further, with regards to the boulevard trees, so what you're basically saying is you can't put the footprint of what you want to build on there without having these trees removed?
Essentially, to complete the required frontage improvements and the required servicing upgrades that are necessary along the lane and the road, and because the property sits below, like it sort of sits a bit lower relative to the street, and we're going to be having to build up the property in order to get the house above the flood construction level, these trees will need to go. So primarily servicing, a little bit to do with flood construction, but otherwise they cannot remain. There's nothing protected that is being removed, and really nothing of great value. A lot of it's been neglected and really not that suitable to remain.
And if I may, one more, Ms. Chair. So I guess what I'm wondering is you're requesting these variances, and I'm wondering why you actually overall need them. You've given a rationale, but in terms of why you couldn't construct something that would have conformed to all the rules and regulations that currently exist on that lot.
Well, thank you. I did speak to that in the sense that the desire for these homes is to have space for a family, and with the allowable lot coverage on a site like this, at the allowable lot coverage, your square footage is sort of roughly down around 12 to 1,500 square feet, which doesn't provide enough space to really be able to have a family of any size and have any space to live. So that was where the additional lot coverage provides the necessary space to make it a suitable, viable family home. And just, sorry, in the last few minutes, I've had a chance to receive some information from the owner, and the sell price for these homes would be sort of just sub 1 million, so sort of between the $950,000 and $1 million range is sort of where the price point will be for these homes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. And we now have Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. You anticipated my question about what the square footage would have been if you'd fit within the bylaw. So I'm just wondering what other storage options you have besides the garages. I'm looking at 2.5 bathrooms for 3 bedrooms. I know other families are weird, but I have a 4-bedroom house with 1.5 bathrooms, and somehow we get by. But I feel like we would have a lot of trouble if we didn't have our basement and our storage that we have. So I'm wondering if you put any consideration into actually subbing some storage in there instead of an additional bathroom. Or I mean, I don't know, maybe other people just won't even buy a house that doesn't have 1 bathroom for every family member. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think a lot of this layout responds to market demands for what people are looking for in a new home these days. Ideally, we would build a crawl space here and offer that space for storage. But as I said, with forecasted sea level rise and the natural grades of these properties, we're not able to construct a crawl space. Our only avenue is to build the garage as tall as we can within the bylaw and use some attic space, some mezzanine space in the garage for storage. Creative use of attic spaces within the design of the house itself. So again, in these types of constructions, we're looking at creating heated attic spaces, so fully insulated attics where mechanical storage and basic uses of the attic that otherwise would go unused or where we can find storage in these layouts without taking away floor area.
Thank you. And one more, if I may.
Yep.
So you've got patios and fully bricked in patios. I'm guessing they're pavers, and hopefully that would still be permeable. But I just thought, wow, that's a lot of hardscaping and a lot of house coverage. And then there's no grass; like they don't even have access to grassed yards. So I can see on the smaller one, a patio might be all that you could fit there, because it would be probably shaded by both buildings most of the time. But on the larger one, can you speak to whether or not you could have green area there? I'm thinking if there's a family in there, it would be nicer to have kids playing on a lawn than on a patio, but.
A lot of the times in these small lots, we're finding that any house with a property with a small setback, it's really not functional to have grass down the sides. There still will be a large amount of green space on the boulevard. Space between the street and basically the front of the house. We do get feedback from people that they would far prefer usable patio space on small lots versus a yard that is grass, but it's really not big enough to utilize. This property is also in short walking distance to park facilities and areas where green space is accessible. And I think in this day and age, grass is not the desired landscape surface for a lot of people, even with kids. It's just, you buy a house on a small lot, and one of the advantages that you're not maintaining grass, and you can have a patio that is permeable and is not creating stormwater issues, but it's a space that you can enjoy outside all year round, whereas grass is seasonal, and it's just not ideal when it's not an expansive area that you can actually play on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we go to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. Some comments and questions. So first of all, in regards to the garage space, so you talked a lot about using that for storage. So, is the plan to still fit a car in there? Or is it primarily for storage? I can't tell from here. Is there room, is there a driveway leading up to the garage so that there would be also room outside of the garage for another car, or no?
There is opportunity for driveway and outdoor parking on one of the lots, which would be the interior lot. So they will have a driveway space and parking free of the garage, where that does not exist, on the lot closest to the laneway. And, required parking and whether or not somebody uses that facility for required parking is always a question. There is no bylaw that says anyone needs to use their garage. So we, provide that facility, and in most cases, a garage that is sort of laid out well can serve the function of both storage and space for a car if you so choose to use it that way. Otherwise, there's street parking that a lot of people exercise, even who have double driveways and large garages, they're still using street parking. So, I think the garage gives people the flexibility of using it for storage for bikes if they don't have cars, which again, is perhaps somebody else's priority. So, you know, the space is there. It meets the requirements for required parking and can suit a car, but otherwise can be used for storage. So.
Yeah, okay. I guess one of the points I'm kind of leading to is, as Councillor Duncan previous alluded to, about having more, you know, storage within the house. And if houses were designed for more storage inside, less requirement for people to be using their garages, and yes, there's street parking, but that's creating quite an issue in our downtown core these days and in you know, residential neighborhoods. So preference would be more storage in the house so that people actually park their cars in the garage. Just a couple other comments in regards to the size of the house and size of the garage. I'm also concerned about the lack of green space. I understand that, you know, this is what you're thinking the market is interested in, but, you know, I know my kids and people in their age group looking to buy their own house, they would rather have a smaller house at a lower price. They'd be fine with 1.5 bathrooms and not such a huge garage. So I'd like to see a little bit, it's disappointing to see a house for a family that really has no green space. And yep, I guess they can walk to the park, but there's nothing like, I don't know, kids being able to have their own little green space in their yard. I guess, yeah, I think the other questions have been already covered, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions for the proponent this evening? Mayor McNeil Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Hoyt. If you could turn to, please, it's in our agenda package, it's page 15. It's in your diagrams, it's development perspective from the southwest. Are you able to turn to that page on our screen?
You'd like me to share that with you, sorry?
Yes, please. Thank you. So referring to the upper left photograph, the brownish-orange fence across the front, that is the property line, and in front of that is boulevard, is that correct?
No, just this graphic probably better represents the fence is sort of right in front here,
Okay.
and there's gardens. So this is the green space, which is all on the boulevard. So there is a patio, a garden, and essentially a little bit of greenery between that and the property line, and then a large boulevard of green space between the front property line and the street.
Okay, thank you. And if you could go back to that previous photo. And again, if you can just enlarge it slightly, on the laneway side of the house, that fence is the property line on the left-hand side?
That's correct.
Okay, so that laneway will all be paved after the development's completed?
We do have a servicing requirement to upgrade the paving on the laneway.
Okay, so that will be paved. Can you please go to the slide, it was earlier on, and it showed you had a photograph of the current frontage of the property, please? Thank you. So you did explain, either in your presentation or addressing a question, that due to flood control level, those trees will be removed at the front. We can see, I think there's a gate there in between the the middle trees. Yeah, where your arrow is there, that would be the property line at present?
Thereabouts.
Yeah. So what is your understanding of, or what are your plans for that deep boulevard, and what do you understand your options are for that boulevard?
Well, essentially, the boulevard will remain the opportunity for tree replanting at a 2-to-1 ratio, which is required by the tree removal bylaw. So the servicing, I'll just pull up another slide here so you can see where we have a new storm drain, and that's going to basically construct it and dig up that boulevard along Orchard, and then where new water services come in along there as well. So that area will be retained as green space and replacement trees planted in there.
Okay, so would it be grass then from the property line out to the road's edge?
It certainly could be in sort of in keeping with what it is now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Seeing none, I'll thank you very much, Mr. Hoyt, for your presentation and taking questions. And
If I can just, sorry, I just have one more comment. I've just had one more point of clarity from the owner of the property, and just that the existing tenants were given 4 months of reduced rent upon notice that there was an application being made for the property, so that they, in an effort to help them transition out of the property.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyt. I'll now turn it over to council for deliberation at this point. Thank you. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move that development permit application number DP 100825 to permit the construction of 2 small lot single-family dwellings, and development variance permit application number DV 100310 to relax the requirements for lot coverage, accessory building setbacks, and width of accessory buildings for the property at 2313 Orchard Avenue be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Wainwright. Councillor Rintoul. No. As anybody else? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering if we need to remove the proponent while we discuss, or?
Yes, staff is.
Thank you.
Councillor Garnett.
Thank you very much. I spent some time out looking at this property, and was hearkening back to something that happened during the election campaign. I was reached out to by a resident and asked a question if I believed in granting variances for new developments. And of course, that was due to the perceived overusage of variances during the previous council's term. And what I said to the resident was that if there was a significant positive impact or benefit for our community, I said, yeah, I'd be all into doing that. So I kind of looked at this particular, although being smallish, looked at it through that lens, and I tried to find positives, temporary labor, employment opportunities. You're removing an older house, putting in 2 new ones are more energy efficient. Aesthetically, it'd be nicer for the area, and a slight increase to tax base. And then I tried to look at things that I thought were negative. And although I do appreciate the permeable nature of the hard surfaces, the footprint of these 2 buildings and the garages is quite a bit more. So I worry about what we're doing in this area of town in terms of, and Councillor Duncan had mentioned this before, in terms of the permeability and how much more we're squeezing into lots, and how that's going to impact our community going forward in the future. I understand what the proponent was saying about the boulevard trees, although I do have concerns about a private development being able to reach over and into a boulevard, which is town-owned, basically town trees owned by the residents of the community and able to remove them. I find that problematic, even though I understand partially why they want to do that. These particular trees have been neglected. I don't know whose fault that is, if it's ours as a town or the homeowner's fault. They should have been maintained better. I owned a home I moved into a home that was in that situation, and I cleaned it up, and those trees thrived for decades. So I still believe those trees could thrive if they were treated properly. The main issue I have around it is about the non-suiting, and I know there's parameters of size, and we're losing a home that's rented, and I appreciate the owners have done something to help the people who have to try and find somewhere else to live. I look at our housing needs assessment and how dire it is for us to have market and below market rentals. And yes, we can't dictate to a developer that they try and help us meet our housing needs, although I would hope they would want to as members of our community building in it. It seems like the morally responsible thing to do, but we can't do that. These homes, 950,000 to $1 million, and I'm really hung on this because they're pushing these as family homes, and I mean I must travel in a different circle of people. I don't know any families that can afford $950,000 to $1 million homes, not without an income helper, which would be a suite, and not the lack of green space, somewhere to put your kids where you don't have to walk to a park. These are all important things. Do we need a garage? Is it permeable? Go back to permeable. You could just have permeable paving stones and not have a garage. But the whole idea that a family is going to be able to afford these homes, I just don't see it, and it's being repeated and repeated and repeated. So for me, from my perspective, it's like these variances are not about family homes. This is about creating the most in a small space to maximize the bottom line. And although we can't dictate whether private developers help us in our housing needs assessment areas, at the same time, we're not responsible for helping them maximize their profit margins by giving them variances. And so I circle back to the question that this resident asked me, and I look at this and I don't see a significant positive benefit from our community by this. So as much as I support and appreciate and respect our APC and value their input, I'm prepared to not see this go forward. I would like to see something else come back, or work within the confines of a building or structure that conforms to what's allowed on the site. At the end of the day, they need to make it work there, or provide a variance. Sure, this came in and both these had suites, I'd probably be completely on board with it. But it doesn't, so I don't see the benefit of providing variances in this case. So I won't be supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor O'Keefe? Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe and then Councillor Duncan.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a difficult one for me to justify. I recognize that the developer is wanting to maximize the profit on their property, squeeze as much house and garage as they can in there. But, our job is to, we want to see more housing, but, balance that with providing housing that's suitable for families that we want to attract and livable spaces. And I don't want to end up with a completely paved over orchard area. I'm worried about, pavement creep in terms of, once you get one house in there that is kind of wall-to-wall house, garage, and patio and no yard, it sort of becomes an accepted thing. And I'm worried about that sort of extending throughout the orchard area. The price of the house, we have no control over that, really. That's, the market drives that. But the thing is, smaller houses are cheaper. And I think that's what young families would prefer to see. They could probably do without an extra bathroom and maybe 2 bedrooms in a den, some other sort of configuration that it would at least allow them to get a foot in the door in our difficult housing market. So I prefer to see something smaller. It's really hard for me to justify such a huge, big variance with the garages. So I'm not, we could send it to APC and it will probably go there. It would be interesting to hear their comments, but I can't see myself supporting it when it comes back. I think that's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Duncan?
Thank you. I feel similarly to my colleagues where we have this OCP. I mean, we have a goal to build more housing, and converting one house to two presumably increases our housing supply, except for $1 million house is not a home, is not housing. I don't know anyone who could, no family, well, there's going to be families somewhere who can afford $1 million house, but that's not the limitation we currently have at all. Our last housing report told us that the peninsula was overserved by 7,000 luxury houses already. And even though these are basic houses, that is a luxury price tag. That is a big price tag. And the best we could hope for, really, is that somebody who is very, very wealthy buys them as investment properties, because that's what this is. This is not creating housing. This is somebody probably getting a very plum retirement out of selling their property to a developer. And then we hope that somebody else who's very wealthy, because they've similarly flipped property elsewhere, will then rent them out, because that's our biggest limitation right now, is rental housing for families. I would not support this if this had suites. We do have a suite limitation, but not for families. The one thing I hear over and over again is that nobody can afford an actual house for their family, and the suites, they can't fit them in. I heard of families of 4 in 850 square foot basement suites during the COVID lockdown, and we do not need more of those. So if this didn't require the variance, we wouldn't really be having this discussion. So I'm not sure what this tells us about what we have power to do as a council to kind of prevent this kind of thing from happening. I don't know if this is the kind of thing where I want to send it to, OCP as well, and just kind of say, so this is what happens when we allow people to subdivide lots, is that all that ends up happening is we increase the price of the lot, and it makes it more desirable for somebody to flip it for way more money. We're not actually allowing people to build denser housing that creates more. And I think we've proven that over and over and over again, that we have in no way accommodated more housing by allowing people to do this. So I feel very similarly that it's just like this. We've discovered that this experiment has failed, and the developers can try to meet those bylaws all they want. They're not actually going to produce us anything that we need. So I don't know if it's useful to hear from APC either.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Mayor McNeil-Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. I share concerns that colleagues have expressed, and I guess without repeating them or the parts of them that I concur with, the concern is that we're granting variances, or the proponent, if I understand his argument, needs these variances to add square footage to the house and to the garage structure to make it a viable family home. And I think I heard the figure 1,700 or 1,800 square feet. Well, there are family homes smaller than 1,800 square feet. And it comes back to the point that Councillor Garland made is what is the additional value? Well, the additional value is to a larger home that is worth more value, but what is the value to the community? And I think we have to weigh the pros and cons, and we've seen the con being the hardscaping of virtually the entire property. Except for a postage stamp piece of grass out front and a little strip in front of the property line. And so I have concerns with that. The proponent makes reference to precedents, and I took the time to look at some of those precedents in the Orchard neighborhood. In fact, the proponent showed 2 of the precedents on 8th Avenue that are recently, one of them's just completing as we speak now. And this takes me to the second point that I want to make, and was the reason for asking the question with regards to the property line in the boulevard on Orchard. And I also meant to ask the question of the intention for the boulevard in front of what the property line is on 8th Avenue. And the reason is because that's going to be the only grass, or that's going to be the only landscaping for these homes. And if you take a look at the other 2 properties that have been subdivided into small lots, they have gravel on the boulevard from the street to the property line, and cars are parked there. So this is a question through to staff, is in terms of, and sorry, I'm going to say that I support this going to APC because I would like APC to, and I think it's their function, and I think it serves value to us for them to review the presentation, and they have the criteria that they review, proposals, but they've also heard our comments as well, and come up with their own. But my question through the staff is during the presentation to APC, will it be clear in terms of what the options are for the boulevards on Orchard Avenue and on 8th Street, and what the intention of the proponent is, and that information will come back to us? Because when I go to the earlier approval that we gave on 8th Street, that is now gravel from the street to the front, I just don't recall having that discussion, and I think I would have expressed concern at that time, but I leave my question through to staff with regards to the boulevards, please.
Ms. Verhagen?
Thank you. Through the chair to the mayor. The boulevard standards are dictated by Town Bylaw 1390. That's the subdivision and development bylaw, which has a cross-section for the Orchard neighborhood, which is a special schedule. It's a different boulevard treatment than the rest of our single and two-family neighborhoods. I believe this was discussed at council the other day in light of a different development application. So Ms. Clary might want to weigh in here too from an engineering perspective, but the bylaw does require on the south side of Orchard Avenue, which is the north frontage of this property, the front lot line of this one, it requires a shallow swale for water control and grass. So that's what would be required there, unless something different was negotiated with engineering staff, but that is the bylaw requirement there. There might be a little bit of road widening in the gravel edge, but then the rest of it would be grass with boulevard trees.
Thank you for that. And 8th Street?
On 8th Street, it's the same. A gravel edge and then grass.
Thank you. If I might share a subsequent question, hearing that information. So hearing from the proponent and reading in the staff report that, given flood control level, the property is going to rise on the property. I mean, the building is going to rise, but I gather the landscaping is going to rise because it is currently below the street grade. And so we're here, and so I'm hearing for a second time, we heard it through another variance request with regards to swale in terms of, this is drainage management in terms of the use of swales?
Ms. Verhagen?
Yes, through the chair to the mayor. The drainage there, that is for surface drainage. Any grading in terms of flood hazard mitigation would be kept on site. Retaining walls would have to be kept to a minimum, and water that falls, like rainwater that falls on the site, has to be caught on the site and retained and controlled on the property.
Okay. And so we've heard about the 2-for-1 tree replacement, given the trees that will be removed. How does the town decide how many trees will or won't go on the Orchard Boulevard and the 8th Street Boulevard? Apart from the 2-for-1 replacement.
Through the chair to the mayor, and again, Ms. Clary might want to weigh in on trees on the boulevard. In general, for subdivisions, we require 1 street tree per property being created, which would be 2 in this case along the Orchard Avenue frontage. There isn't much room for more than that on these frontages. Any other trees would be planted elsewhere. They might be able to plant 1 replacement tree on each of the lots within the landscaping on the site. Ms. Clary, if you wanted to weigh in more about boulevard tree locations, please do.
Ms. Clary?
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. I don't have too much to add. We do lean on the town's arborist to select appropriate tree species and to plant them in locations that are appropriate. This location does have hydro lines there, so that might impact the species that's selected and the location of planting.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question. In the property, two properties to the west on Orchard Avenue, on the boulevard, there was 3 maple trees planted. But I just saw that and said, you know, it's nice to have three trees like that there. But my question is actually with regards to the laneway. And so part of the laneway today is actually grass and there's some trees on it, and we understand those will be removed. So will that laneway be paved? It does mention in the staff report that the laneway will be paved, but will it be paved from property line to property line?
I can speak to that one. The standard requirement for the lane improvements as part of the subdivision is 1 meter gravel shoulder on each side with 4 meters paved in the center with water control. The lane is 6 meters wide. So 4 meters asphalt centered in the lane and then 1 meter each side gravel.
Okay, so if there is no landscaping or soft surface in the laneway, then the property owners are not required for any maintenance of the laneway? Is that correct?
Ms. Clary, if you could speak to maintenance of the lane. I know the property owners are required to maintain their boulevard, but in general, there would be no landscaping within the lane in this area when the subdivision is complete for those owners to maintain.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor McNeil-Smith. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks to committee colleagues for their comments. I think it's been a really thoughtful discussion. I'm quite comfortable seeing this go to Advisory Planning Commission in that, as the Mayor noted, it's a process that we have to give our APC the opportunity to provide their experience and view it through that lens and provide comment back to council. But like others here, I have concerns with this. I do note, I feel developers wouldn't be building and proposing this if there weren't a market. So we know there's a market. We might not be comfortable that it's not addressing an element of our housing needs that have been clearly identified. But this developer wouldn't be moving forward if they weren't confident that they're going to bring new residents to our town. And so I do look at it to an extent through that lens as well, but I get that not at any price with respect to livability, and that we've got a responsibility certainly to ensure that that our community is livable and a space that can be enjoyed by everyone. So I've got concerns with this, and I think APC will have a good opportunity to vet this through that critical lens as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other first-time speakers, I'll just make some comments in here. I concur with so much of what I've just heard at the table this evening in regards to this, and as Councillor Garnett started off and talked about granting variances, what does the community get back for it? And I think we have an OCP in place. We have guidelines for what is expected to be built there, and I think the community deserves to get something back if we're going to grant a variance. As has been pointed out, construction costs what it costs, and housing will also cost what it costs. We can't alter that. But I don't think in the end, by granting the variances, plural, that we are going to achieve what we need as far as our housing for so many members of our community. And even if we were to have an application in front of us, a house with a suite, that's not to say that the property owner would rent out the suite, so we might not be any further ahead. But I think I agree that there is a process in place. I'm willing to let it go to APC. I'm not impressed with the proposal from an aesthetic perspective, not just the hardscaping, but I know that that's not our purview, but nevertheless, that's not stopped me before, so I'll do it again. I'm not impressed with the architecture. I find especially the east facade, the side facades are very plain and uninviting. And I think considering there is such a large expanse that is going to be facing the public view, personally, it's unattractive. And I happen to like modern architecture, so it's not that, but I just don't, this one doesn't warm me. So I'll leave it there. I'm willing to support this going to APC, but because I want to hear what APC has to say on it. But as it stands right now, I'm not very supportive of the application. Do we have any second-time speakers? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thanks. Just a couple other tidbits. So in terms of the comment about, we don't really have any control over what developers decide to build. Well, we kind of do, yeah, if they followed all of the requirements, that's fine. But this is a case where they're wanting some significant variances, and so we don't have to allow it. So we can say no, and then we force developers that, yeah, they have to build a smaller house, and maybe they won't get as much money as they like, but I'm quite certain that there would be a market for it, and it would sell. The reason I'm not in favor of sending it to APC is, at this point, I can't imagine anything coming back that would make me feel more comfortable about approving it. And the other reason is, I know that, time is money for developers. And so if in my thinking right now that I don't see any scenario where I would approve these variances, I don't think it's fair to make the developer linger longer. And so it allows them to get on with things and say, okay, they don't like this, let's go back to the drawing board and not continue to draw it out. So that's my rationale. Thank you.
Any other second-time speakers? Then I will just make one last comment, and Councillor O'Keefe, your comments in regards to hearing back from APC has struck with me, because I don't like what I see in front of me, and should we belabor it by sending it forward for a committee to look at if I don't see anything that I'm willing to support. So on that, I won't be voting in favor of moving this forward to APC. So one last time, do we have any more speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? We have 3 in favor. Opposed? 4 opposed. Motion fails. Thank you very much. That takes us to staff reports, and none there. And we have other business. CRD board meeting highlights, September 8th, 2021. We have the Performing Arts Facility Services. Councillor Wainwright.
Excuse me, Chair, but just in terms of finishing off that application, we decided not to forward it to APC, but we didn't actually reject it. And I'm just wondering what committee wants to do. We could leave it open, and obviously they can reapply. They will need a development permit regardless, so it kind of makes sense to leave that one open. The variance permit, though, is what people don't have any support for at all. At any rate, I'm just wondering if we finish with this.
So do we have any comments from staff of where we should go, or does someone from council wish to make another motion? Mr. Humble?
Through the chair, it's at council's discretion now if they want to make a subsequent motion.
Thank you. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, through to staff. So what would be the status of the application if we did not pursue it further? Sorry, a question through the Chair to staff. What would be the status of the application and the variance permit, development permit application and the DVP application if we did not pass the subsequent motion?
Through the chair, it's potentially in limbo one could interpret as being denied, but again, we would have to look into it. But right now, there's no subsequent motions, so it would be good to have something.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
I'll make the subsequent motion. Let's see where I want to start this here. I move the development variance permit application number DV100310 to relax the requirements for lot coverage, accessory building setbacks, and width of accessory buildings for the property at 2313 Orchard Avenue be denied.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have we have 2 opposed. Motion carries.
Now, I guess just for clarity's sake, do I need to move that the development application go ahead, or does it kind of go ahead just as it is now that it's been left open?
Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Chair. To my colleague, in the past, we've left it open, and that allows the applicant to revise the plans without having to pay a fee.
Thank you. So that puts an end to development application point 6 on our agenda. All right, now we move to part A on the agenda, or 8, which is the CRD board meeting highlights of September 8th, 2021. We have the Performing Arts Facility Service Establishing Bylaw number 4445 and the Services Plan, as well as the outcomes of board initiative to explore partnerships and support 100% participation in the CRD arts function. Mayor McNeil Smith, you brought that forward at last meeting. If you'd like to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as the council representative to the CRD board, Capital Regional District Board, I have been appending the monthly CRD board meeting highlights to my mayor's report on a monthly basis. This did come forward at our regular council meeting last Monday, and I referred it by motion to this evening's meeting because there are 2 items, both concerning arts within the Capital Regional District that could involve all municipalities and electoral areas. And I wanted to speak to or give a bit of background. There are detailed reports that are appended within the meeting highlights, but I wanted to speak to the process that the board has undertaken and committees have undertaken. Council has had some involvement in this process. Our council has had some involvement in this process on one of the 2 files. And so I wanted to start by saying that, and I will be asking at the end of my presentations, and if there are any questions, just moving receipt for information of both these reports. But the Capital Regional District Board, in creating its strategic plan at the beginning of this term, had as one of its strategic initiatives, and I'm going to quote here, and there's 2 parts to it, but it's all one sentence: facilitate a discussion of the region's art facility needs. And so that's speaking to regional arts facilities, the infrastructure. And then it says, and explore partnerships to support 100% participation in the CRD arts function. And we do know there is a performing arts and culture support function that's separate and from facilities. It has its own service establishment bylaw. And there was a separate process to look at that. So the way it's laid out on the agenda, I'll speak to the arts facility part of it first, and then I'll speak to the Arts and Cultural Support Service. So in setting this strategic initiative, the concern was that there is the Royal and the McPherson theaters in Victoria that are certainly considered regional facilities in terms of who attends those facilities, but that there might be other regional facilities, and that while there is a small CRD service bylaws for those facilities, with a small number of municipalities participating in those, that if we're to look to the future in terms of renewal of those facilities, possible new facilities, or the future of existing and new arts facilities in the region that are considered regional facilities, that we might be better working together through the CRD in terms of funding opportunities, providing funding opportunities to such facilities. And so a committee was struck called the Performing Arts Facilities Select Committee. It was struck in the fall of 2019. We hired and I sat on that committee. It was one of about 10 CRD directors, was the representative from the peninsula, sitting on that committee. We a consultant was retained, and they spent a number of months engaging facilities, dozens of arts facilities across the region, not just ones that someone might consider a regional facility, but as many facilities as they could, whether they were high school theaters or the large theaters and other venues. They came back with a report. The report was called Stage 1, A Public Conversation About Performing Arts Facilities, and it showed strong community support for the CRD taking on an expanded role in supporting performance arts facilities with a regional impact. The Memorial Park Society, which operates the Mary Winspear Center, which also has the Charlie White Theatre, was engaged as part of that engagement process, and they contributed information, and in the facilities report, their information was provided. That report is not here. I appended that report several months ago, or sometime last year, and spoke briefly to it. And at some point, Executive Director Brad Edgett came before us and spoke to. He had a comment with regards to it. But in general, we found it a useful report, and so that committee requested staff to actually draft an establishing regional performing arts facility service bylaw and a service plan. And so the bylaw establishes the funding mechanism and who could participate, and it was envisioned that all 16 to try to attract all 16, 13 municipalities and 3 electoral areas to be part of this service. And so the steps were to go through that consultant's report, the engagement process, produce the bylaws. So the bylaw came to our CRD board meeting last meeting on September the 8th, and we gave it first, second, and third reading. And the next step would be to choose an approval process. And in the staff report, it indicates that there are 3 possibilities for approval. And bear with me while I just turn to that detail. So before the new service bylaw can be adopted, so it's been given first, second, third reading, but hasn't been given adoption yet. So before the service bylaw can be adopted, it must receive approval of the electors, that is the citizens of the region, and the inspector of municipalities at the provincial government. And the Local Government Act provides 3 ways to obtain approval, and that method is to be decided by the board. And the 3 options are a region-wide referendum. The second option is an alternative approval process. And the third is that consent by municipal council, so by each municipal council, so it would be each of the 13 municipalities, and by alternative approval process within the electoral areas. That's really the only mechanism that they have. And so there was a recommendation that the alternative approval process be chosen as the electoral process. It would still have to go to the inspector of municipalities. However, that part of the motion was defeated. So while we gave it first, second, and third reading, we did not approve. We did not pass an approval process. We did not consider the other two approval processes. We've requested staff, CRD staff, to bring back more information at a future meeting in terms of what that approval process, what our approval process options remain. So that's a process. I haven't given any background in terms of, you know, what was spoken in favor or what the concerns were in terms of moving forward in this direction. Again, it arose out of strategic direction by the board in its strategic plan, and through a process through committee, and then through the board. It also went through the governance committee, sort of thing. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I can say that I've kept in touch with Executive Director Brad Edgett during this process, as has representatives, both the mayor and the councillor from North Saanich, because they're a funding partner as well. There is one very important thing I need to speak to, and that is in the service plan, which is included in the documents, in the CRD staff documents. It actually speaks to, and it actually gives a simulation, if you will, that if all of the municipalities and electoral areas contributed to this service, what the budget would be. Well, they started with the budget, and then they worked backwards in terms of what their support would be. All of the existing, the 4 municipalities that currently pay into the services that maintain the Royal would not have their fees or their amounts reduced. The amount collected from the other municipalities would be in addition to that. So it was, and so I should say that in both the original consultant's report and in the service establishment and the service plan, it recognizes the Mary Winspear Centre as a regional arts facility. And part of the information that was provided to that was that over 30%, this is pre-COVID, over 30% of audience members to theatre performances at the Mary Winspear Centre are from outside the peninsula. I didn't get a figure with North Saanich because North Saanich is not a funding partner, but it would be a little higher than 30%. So it is a regional facility, and it was recognized in both the consultant's report. The detail was provided by the Mary Winspear Centre in terms of the dollar amount contributions that Sydney makes and North Saanich makes, which is quite substantial. I believe it's close to $350,000 for Sydney this year. In terms of that contribution being made at the municipal level, how would that work with an amount being provided by the CRD? There is only one taxpayer. And so it's recognized in the service plan that there would have to be discussions, negotiations between the town of Sydney, the District of North Saanich, and the Memorial Park Society before any agreements could be struck such that they would be considered part of or receive grants from that funding service. But in the service establishment bylaw, it does indicate, and again, this is just a pro forma, if you will, with the budget that was estimated, that they could be fairly significant amounts going to the Mary Winspear Centre, and there was a capital side to it, and there was an operating side to it, and it does say approximately $300,000 on the capital side and approximately $180,000 on the operating side. Now those are absolute estimates, and those numbers could be revised substantially based on discussions, based on the outcome of the approval process and discussions with the municipalities. Two other aspects that I spoke at the outset in terms of the reason for this being a strategic priority at the board level is that it recognized that at least 2 other municipalities, Langford and Colwood, are looking at developing theaters that they would consider to be regional facilities. And a service such as this, if they were participants of it, would look to providing funding support to those facilities in some way similar to the way it would be to the Memorial Park Society. So the Memorial Park Society governance structure doesn't change. What it is it's a funding mechanism based on a CRD service bylaw. So I hope I've captured the important parts and summarized it, and I'm open to any questions, and we'll certainly report back as we go into subsequent CRD board meetings.
Thank you, Mayor McNeil-Smith. Committee, Councillor Rentoul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, Mr. Mayor, given that you're saying the funding would be eligible for capital as well as operating expenses, does it then, has the discussion then gone down the road of what implications there may be to staffing operationally? And I say that because some of those venues in Victoria and their agreements are unionized facilities, and I'm just curious then as to whether or not this, adds additional operational costs to, for example, the Mary Winspear Centre, as it's identified as a regional arts facility, that whether or not that's been considered as part of the discussion to date.
It hasn't, to my understanding. I don't know if there were discussions between CRD and the Memorial Park Society Executive Director Brad Edgett. In the service establishment plan, it does speak to the CRD staff. That would be, there's actually an organizational chart, if you will. One other aspect to the funding is there are planning grants that will be available as well, because it's infrastructure and requires further planning, and so those sorts of grants. The one aspect I didn't come back to again at the end that I touched on at the beginning was that the Royal Theatre, the McPherson Theatre, are those going to be the theatres, the major centres in the capital region, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And if they're not, what would be the mechanism to go to the next large regional theatre? And under the current funding mechanism, the current service plans, that would be difficult. So this tries to address future needs with no thoughts as to timing or what that would be. Right now, what's on the plate is actually Langford and Colwood actually planning, smaller regional centers. But as municipal areas, large municipal areas grow, like the capital region, their arts facilities tend to grow over time as well.
So if I may, Chair, just in follow-up, I would suggest that be part of the dialogue, in that you're noting that some CRD staff, that overhead would be assigned to a cost center, in this case, the Mary Winspear Centre, that there would be operational expenses that don't exist now. That should certainly be explored as part of this process, would be my comment. And I'd also note that it sounds like it could be a path to financial sustainability for the Mary Winspear Centre, as opposed to the relationship it currently has with just two of the municipalities, when there's such a significant user group outside of the immediate catchment. So thank you.
Thank you. And if I made one comment that just arose, is if this service establishment, it would become a CRD requisition and would be on the CRD portion of the property tax bill, not the municipal portion.
Okay, following speakers, I've got Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Garnett.
Thank you. So a few questions. I'm wondering, so they've identified Mary Winspear. It sounds like in their review, they looked at a large number of all the, school community theaters. So how do they determine which are going to be the regional theaters? So, there's that little one in at Oak Bay High School. I think there's some others around town. So how does it get determined? Is that by the municipality puts up their hand and says, we want to be a regional theater, or the school board? Just wondering how that works.
Through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe, that's an excellent question, and it's actually addressed under the definitions on the first page of the bylaw.
Okay.
And so there are, I'm seeing 6 criteria. And we actually had some discussion about the criteria, and should it be more specific to easily identify those. Presently, the Mary Winspear Centre is only identified tentatively, while there's no specific plans for Langford and no specific plans for Colwood, based on discussions. But they're not spoken to in the service plan at this time. The other thing I should touch on is that given the approval process that would be required, this wouldn't actually come into effect as a bylaw until 2023. So the approval process would commence through calendar 2022. And so there are definitions, and what would happen is, while the CRD may not have yet identified other facilities with a regional impact, as it did with the Mary Winspear Centre, if this were to become established, then other organizations would be able to apply for the different streams of grants, and that a criteria would have to be applied.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, carry on. So I'm just trying to understand a bit clearer the financial aspect. So currently, we provide money to the Mary Winspear, I believe, to keep running. So would it be then that instead of providing that chunk of money, that would go to the CRD instead, or do we do both? So do we still continue to give Mary Winspear money, and we also give a donation to the CRD, or does one cancel each other out?
Okay. Yeah, not intended to cancel each other out. So
Okay.
as you've touched on, and I tried to touch on, that currently the town of Sydney provides a grant to the Mary Winspear Centre on behalf of the taxpayers of Sydney, and it's quite substantial. And what would happen is, if this CRD, Service Establishment Bylaw, came into being, it would collect taxes from the same residents, and a portion of those would go to the Mary Winspear Centre. The funding, or sorry, I'll call it a foundational principle for me, in terms of this regional approach, if you will, is on the premise that there are significant users beyond the municipalities that are funding the Royal and the McPherson, and they're not contributing. They're contributing by paying ticket prices, but they're not contributing through their property taxes. And similarly, I mentioned the figure of approximately 30% or more outside of the region that are doing the same for the Mary Winspear Centre, and so it is a regional centre. So we have a principle that we use in recreation. So the Panorama Rec Commission and other rec commissions, what they do is, and we just went through the Panorama Rec budget for 2022 last month, is that approximately 50% of the $9 million budget for the Panorama Rec Commission for next year will come from CRD requisition of the residents on the peninsula. And approximately 50% will come from user pay if you sign up to play tennis or you go swimming and that sort of thing. So in that funding principle, if you will, there are people who pay through their CRD property taxes for that recreational facility and don't necessarily use them, but it is for the community benefit in recreation. Another kind of foundational principle for me is that, and this may have more to do with the performing arts side, which I'm going to speak to next, but it also is for facilities, is that the Capital Regional District owns 13,000 hectares of parkland. Not all of that parkland is accessible to the public. Some is kept for environmental purposes, but it maintains an extensive network of regional parks for the Capital Regional District. And our residents may or may not use those parks, but again, through their CRD taxes, through their CRD portion of their property tax bill, they are paying for those parks. And the budget is quite substantial. It's in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million a year for regional parks. And so while local taxpayers are contributing to that through their municipal taxes, they are also maintaining significant municipal parks in our community. So we support, municipal parks, locally, but the taxpayers are also supporting the regional parks. So in the arts, you could say the same, and we've had conversation at this table that we support the arts, both the facility and both the performing arts through the Arts Council significantly on a local basis. But and we've had other discussion that I won't go back into about doing that on a regional basis. But that's the idea. So the idea is that the CRD funds just automatically replace the municipal funds. Is that if you're accepting that that it's a regional facility is that there is some contribution, so the amounts going to Mary Winspear would be higher than what is currently provided. They would receive, between the municipality and the CRD, they would receive more than they just received from the municipality. As to what those amounts are, what the magnitudes are, that's all for future discussion if we get that far down the road. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'll percolate on it. Can I have one more?
Go for it.
Thanks. So, just on the money side of things and, where accountability and reporting lies. So the way I understand, so if Mary Winspear was a regional, organization, they would
No.
Oh,
They're not, their governance is still the Memorial Park Society.
okay,
They're receiving some funding through CRD.
okay.
Yeah.
And I guess what I was wondering was, okay, so their governance, so they're still gonna report to their regular board, their MPS board. But I would think that there would be reporting requirements as well to the CRD in terms of, does the CRD have any say in how the money is spent? Or do they just hand it off to the Mary Winspear and their board decides this is how we're gonna allocate our money?
Yeah, so there's a governance structure and appreciating that it would, some of the governance might change for the Royal and McPherson. It's not going to change for the Memorial Park Society. There's no suggestion that the governance will change, but the fact that they receive grants, whether they be capital, operating, or planning grants, yes, there would be some reporting mechanism back to the CRD on that.
Okay, that's good for now, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor.
And funding could change from year to year based on priorities and budgets.
Thank you. And Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Just simple question, hopefully. And how would this impact our residents on their tax bill, CRD portion?
I was waiting for that question. It is in the staff reports. So at the end of the
Is it this one?
So it is Appendix F in the CRD staff report, and for Sydney, it would be $12.79 per household. So this was an estimate based on a budget of just over $3 million for the entire region. Currently, the budget is about 2.7 million, but it would go to just over 3 million, and it would be that much per household. Estimated this year, so it was just to give a framework proportional through the region.
Thank you. I just thought that'd be good for the community to hear that.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett.
Okay, well, yeah, that's an estimated figure at this time. It would have to be refined as the process, but I thank you for bringing that out. I should have referred to it in my presentation.
If I may, Mayor McNeil-Smith, just to clarify, go back to what Councillor O'Keefe was asking in the beginning. So what we're supporting the $300,000 to Mary Winspear, and if we were to join in with the regional facility, we would still be paying that $300,000 plus our levy to the CRD for the facilities, or that $300,000 would drop off and the support would come strictly through the CRD levy?
That's to be negotiated. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the municipal portions for Sydney and North Saanich decreased to some degree, but to speak to magnitude, it has to be a discussion between us, North Saanich, and Memorial Park Society and the CRD. But it's a very good question. It's just.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further questions from committee? Okay, if you'd like to carry on.
If I could move receipt of that for information, please.
All right. Seconder? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And that takes us then to the partnerships and support.
Thank you. So the second part of the initiative was with regards to the, no, this is the, okay, that's part of it. So our council knows, because the Arts and Cultural Support Service, the chair of that commission, and the CRD manager of that service presented to us last fall. So we had a full description of how that service operates. Currently, there are 13 municipalities, 3 electoral areas, and currently 8 municipalities and 1 electoral area currently choose to participate in that CRD service bylaw. What is a bit unique about that service bylaw is that the municipalities pay from their municipal taxes to the CRD. Even though it's a CRD service bylaw, it is not a CRD requisition where the residents are paying through their CRD portion of their tax. And that would be a change if this next initiative were to go forward. And so, again, it came out of the strategic board initiative, and the Arts Commission was tasked with reviewing options for achieving 100% participation for the 16 jurisdictions. In the staff report, it outlines how the 7 non-participating jurisdictions were approached. We know how we were approached. We know the decision we took at budget in 2021 that was not to rejoin. So for members of the public who might not be aware, Sydney was a participant in this for a number of years. The previous council voted to withdraw from the service. Our council reconsidered that after a presentation, and in the 2021 budget deliberations, we chose not to rejoin the service. However, we do make a donation to that support service. However, making that donation does not provide us with a number of benefits that are provided within the service, but we are acknowledging a contribution to the regional arts ecosystem. And so what the Arts Commission determined was, when they went through that process and those 7 jurisdictions did not come on board individually, they decided to take an approach where they would present, similar to the pro forma that was presented from the arts facility, is what if you had 16 years, what would the budget look like, what would be the contributions? And again, the determination was that in the end, by the Arts Commission, and what they forwarded to the board for September 8th, was that the existing participants would not pay less if the other participants came on board. The intention is to improve the budget, to improve the support to the regional performing arts organizations, because if all of the municipalities were participating, there would be more arts organizations eligible for receiving grants. And so the commission requested that the bylaw be drafted and forwarded to the board, and that was done. The bylaw was not forwarded to the board. A report was forwarded to the board on September 8th, and the board turned, again in a vote, rejected using the alternative approval process. So I referred to 3 approval processes for the facilities, though those would be the same approval processes to going to a region-wide service bylaw, where it would be a CRD requisition on the property tax bill. But the commission the CRD board has requested that staff prepare the establishing bylaw and prepare a further report on options for approval. And that will come forward at a future board meeting. And again, there is, within that report, there is a pro forma in terms of, and so it's a little coincidental, but the budget is the budget is just over $3 million. but the contribution from Sydney would be $5.18 under the pro forma estimated for 2021. But again, this wouldn't be put in place to a future year and would have to be recalculated again. But it would be $5.18 per resident, and we would be paying 1.3% of the overall budget. I'm open to any questions.
Okay, Councillor Rintoul, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. And to the Mayor, I think it's interesting. I can understand, a desire to encourage participation from all municipalities and electoral areas. To me, with this one, the devil's kind of in the allocation process and the granting process. So it's one thing to collect the funds. The next thing is how it's dispersed. And so I think in the case of Sydney, one of the things that's been most critical about this is that disbursement process and eligibility. Now that seems to be addressed in the discussion we had previously, if this is a regional arts facility here at the Mary Winspear Center. But the same challenge may apply to other municipalities and the lens at which they look through this. So I would hope that a review of that grant process and how those funds would be allocated would be party to this process of review. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just speak to that briefly, if I may. I certainly remember in the past when I sat at the Arts Commission table, one of the difficulties was that the smaller arts groups, the smaller artisans and performers and whatnot, didn't have the wherewithal to write the grants at the CRD, and it was just too cumbersome. It was out of their ken, and they sort of fell through the cracks because there wasn't another organization to meet that need. And that's one of the benefits of our Community Arts Council, and having the dollar value is to help those very groups who weren't being met at the CRD level. And I certainly remember in the past having a conversation with Chair Plant in regards to that. And it's recognized at the CRD that the small groups in the community arts don't have the access, but there's probably no real effective way from the CRD, from the regional perspective, to meet those needs. It then comes down to the municipalities, the communities, to ensure that those smaller groups do have access to the funding. So it is recognized. Don't know if that's the best solution or whatever, but they are aware of that.
Thank you, Chair, for raising that and to Councillor Rintoul. And there has been some discussion of that more at the Arts Commission level, and there's an appreciation of that, and information was circulated with regards to the grants that have been provided each year, and I think it's impressive when you look at the range of organizations through the 5 different granting programs that they have in place now, that they aren't all just larger organizations, that there are smaller organizations that are accessing grants. But again, as Councillor Rintoul has pointed out, the devil's in the details in terms of how the granting program works, but I think it's been acknowledged, and would be a similar, this concern has been shared, through other municipalities that have considered the regional service as well.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. When we had discussed this before, it was about, do we hand our money off to the CRD or do we keep it here? And it's not clear to me, like, have they sweetened the pot? So in terms of, I'm still not clear why we're going through the process with them again, because we said no before. And so if they're coming back to us and saying, please, will you reconsider, is kind of what I'm hearing. And they're saying, it's really not all that expensive. It's only $5.18 per household. Okay, I would rather keep that on the peninsula myself and give it to our small organization. So I'm still trying to figure out, what are they doing to sweeten the pot to make it like, why is this better than what they offered us the first time? Or is it the same, just packaged differently?
Well, two things. One is that if you go to an electoral approval process, such as referendum, I mean, you're hearing from, from the residents on this. And the other is that is going back to that founding thing. Is we support municipal parks and we support regional parks. If there's an appreciation that there's a regional arts ecosystem, do you support? We did support. We did decide as a council to support it to some degree in terms of a donation, which is a recognition of that. I don't think it has to be either or. Now, in speaking it, there was concern that there's been concern that the CRD Arts Service requires a local government, a municipality, to provide their taxes from their local residents rather than as a CRD requisition. But still I appreciate that there's only one taxpayer, but it wouldn't be on the municipal portion of the tax bill. It would be on the CRD portion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is it's kind of the same sort of arguments or proposals that they gave before, that because it's a regional thing, everybody should, contribute. So so it seems like it's the same as what we discussed before. So I'm not seeing anything significantly different, except that it's a different mechanism in order to get the money, that it wouldn't, we wouldn't collect it from our taxpayers and then, we would write a check to the CRD, it would come as a requisition, which is just a change in the method, but it seems like the outcome is sort of the same. And I guess,
Well, if I can just address that specifically,
okay.
is that there's a difference between having some participate and everyone participate.
Can you elaborate on, I'm not.
Well, there is, when everybody is supportive or part of it, there's an opportunity for greater success when you're working together. I mean, Brad Edgett, Executive Director Brad Edgett came and spoke before us, and he said one of the unintended consequences of withdrawing from the support service was that there are small arts organizations that can access grants from the CRD, but they can't use CRD grant funds to perform at the Mary Winspear Centre. If we're all in it together, so the Mary Winspear Centre considers itself to be part of the regional arts ecosystem and that sort of thing, but there are certain organizations that it can't service under the current funding mechanisms.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that. I was just looking for something.
No, but that's an example of a synergy that comes when everybody is.
Yeah, and I think
Just
that was the
working
same
together.
argument that was made before. Let's all go in this together, let's all pool our money, and so I guess what I'm saying is.
No, they were the Arts Commission was coming to municipalities one at a time. And so the Arts and Culture Service has grown from 4 to 9 members over, I think, 20 years. I'm not sure of the exact number of years, but.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I guess the things that are still sticklers for me is what I recall from the presentation is that there was a significant amount of our contribution that would have to go to CRD administration, which would I would rather.
Well, no,
Okay, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding. Okay, and I guess the other thing is.
Sorry, I will acknowledge this, through the chair, I will acknowledge this, that if Sydney, and I don't remember the amounts that were paid, that Sydney contributed, but let's say it was $20,000, or whatever it was, there were years when Sydney-based, peninsula-based, Sydney-based organizations got $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. They didn't get $20,000, but the understanding is that there are Sydney arts organizations that are performing elsewhere And there are Sydney residents that are enjoying performances elsewhere, so you're contributing to that larger arts ecosystem. If everybody was just paying in, whatever they paid in, they were getting back out again, there's no sense in just, in not doing it yourself.
Yeah, I guess.
The arts organizations don't, we worry about municipal boundaries in terms of the decisions we have to make, but the arts organizations are interested in performing for the residents of the regional district or attracting people from beyond.
Yeah, I recognize that. And I guess the thing for me, I guess just in closing is that I guess it's a matter of, you know, where do you want to put your arts money to be administered? And I guess I'd want a bit more information from the CRD, again, about what is different or what is better than what they proposed before. And, you know, I kind of like the idea that, you know, we've just got Artsy up and running with their grant program. You know, my feeling at this time is I'm more inclined to hand the money off to Artsy and let them, you know, distribute as they see fit. So if we're going to reconsider with CRD, yeah, I'd be looking to see what's different from last time that makes it more palatable. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question would center around the specifics and the mechanisms in place. So you're speaking of two, a referendum or municipal decision. So in terms of municipal decision, obviously that's straightforward. We have control over where we want to go along with the bylaw. In terms of the referendum, would that be a regional-wide referendum? And if it passes, then we're just with everybody else, or how does that specifically work?
So thank you for the question through the chair. Is a regional referendum would be, there's an option for the CRD. It can request the municipalities, for example, it could request the municipalities include a referendum question in the election in the fall of 2022. However, municipalities are not obliged to actually include a CRD question on their referendum, and they're not obliged to include the wording in the CRD wording. So they could choose not to include the question, or they could include a question, but the question would be worded differently. So the only way to put the same question before all CRD residents is for the CRD to conduct the referendum, and the results would come back, and for it to move forward, it would require the board would receive the results of the referendum, and it would take a 2/3 majority vote at the CRD board to actually approve the service bylaw. So the referendum doesn't trigger it automatically happen. It comes back to the CRD board and requires a 2/3 majority.
So, sorry if I could follow up. So hypothetically, they run the referendum and it only comes back with, say, 20% support, but then the board would still have the ability to pass the bylaw regardless of how. It seems like it would seem in those instances that the region doesn't want it, but the power would still retain in the board. Is that what I understand you correctly?
I also mentioned that the inspector of municipalities, the provincial minister of inspector of municipalities, the inspector actually has to approve the approval process that the board selects, and that I'm going to actually turn to Councillor Wainwright.
I wanted to jump in. The referendum is an enabling thing.
Yes.
So if the referendum does not pass, then the board cannot pass either.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But if the referendum carries, then the board still has to 2/3 in favor. So it's a two-step process.
Thank you for the clarification. That's kind of what I was seeking.
Better clarification.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just a closing comment. My closing comment would be that, we've just started this process with Artsy, and I would like to give them a chance to see if it proves that this new system we put in place is successful before I would even think about wanting to go a different direction. Just to give them, just to put some confidence in them that they can carry the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment for the benefit of our director on the board. In the past, I can't think of a service establishing bylaw that didn't go to municipal council for consent. That is, I can't think of one where they actually used that region-wide referendum. And I have to say that I'm very concerned if they went down that road, because it's very easy for the core to achieve a 2/3 majority at the CRD board. And the issues we've seen in the past where the board asked municipalities to do a referendum and they didn't all do the same question, it was actually core members that put forward a larger amount of money for it. It was actually the park acquisition levy, and it was supposed to be a 6%, and I recall Saanich going for 10% on theirs. So I really do not have a lot of confidence that the core will do it the regional way. I think given the opportunity, they will vote the way they choose. I recall last time it was ran on a platform of supporting this levy and was elected as a CRD director, so I'm going to vote for that levy. And you know, it just was not a regional perspective being put forward. So I would very much like to see them go with the municipal consent approach and not go for that regional referendum. Anyway, thank you.
Appreciate the input through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll just go back to Councillor O'Keefe's question. One thing that I did notice on the looking through the report is that they had previously, if you'll remember, when the arts came and presented to us in Sydney, one of the questions that or requests that we had was an exit clause. That if we decided that we didn't want to stay in, that we could leave. And we were told at that point, yes, that would be included. And when it went through the commission and the board, what came back was a 2-year exit clause as opposed to an exit clause. It now had a time limit on it. The report now states that they are removing the exit clause, that that's no longer going to be part of the option. The feeling is that this was the only service from the CRD that had an exit clause, and they saw no reason for that to be there. And just to go back in regards to funding the arts groups, and yes, it's going to be a toss-up. The regional granting process is not always going to be supportive of the smaller art initiative, whether it's an individual artist or a small group, performing arts, whatever, to support them and bring them up and give them the exposure. That's where the community arts groups come in with the granting, and that was one of the main drivers, I think, for us at this table, was that we do support our community arts, and we therefore provided the dollars so that there is a grant program. I'll also say that when I looked through statistically for over the years that we were part of the CRD Arts, of the dollars that, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but the dollars that we contributed over the years that we were part of the service, and the dollars that came back through organizations that granted, asked for grants, or were given grants, we came out remarkably well. But that's not to say that everybody who asks, that's the nature of the game of the grants. But I think there is a really strong need for us to support our community arts. Whether we look at the regional arts and say that we're actually going to put dollars and in the sense of joining the service, yes, we have danced that dance a couple of times and had that conversation. So that's just sort of, I just wanted to bring that bit of information just to finish that one off. So Thank you, Mayor McNeil Smith, for bringing these two reports to us and giving us some background from what's happening at the board. Do you have any wrap-up on this one, and before we move receipt?
No, I appreciate the input. I really do, and I would just like to move receipt of the second report, please.
Seconder?
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion passes. And last is adjournment. We've had a good meeting. I thank everybody for the discussion at the table this evening, and thank staff who participated. And so I now ask for adjournment.
So moved.
Seconder? All in favor? Motion passes. We are done. Thank you very much, everyone.